You know, when you listen to some of these reports or some of these questions, you would come out thinking that it's the Palestinians that are besieging Tel Aviv, thinking that it's the Palestinians that are colonizing Israel. Every act Israel does in the occupied territory is an act of aggression. Every act. And as such, and thus, every act we do is an act of resistance.
The scenes of Israel's large-scale attack on the city of Jenin this week have been alarming. In the early hours of Monday, armed vehicles, bulldozers and snipers entered the occupied West Bank city, followed by drones and military helicopters overhead. For 48 hours, the densely populated city, composed largely of refugees, witnessed intense fighting between Israel's army and armed resistance factions. At least 12 Palestinians were killed, including 3 children. More than 3,000 people were forced to flee their homes, some with their hands raised in the air. Violence in the West Bank is the highest it's been in years. Since the beginning of 2022, more than 100 Palestinians have been killed. In May last year, veteran Palestinian journalist Jenin was shot and killed by an Israeli soldier while covering one of these raids. Israel's repeated raids into Jenin, an area technically under the control of the Palestinian Authority, has only bolstered its armed resistance movement and inspired similar movements across the West Bank. It's raised a lot of questions in the minds of many Palestinians, namely surrounding the role or lack thereof of their leadership, the Palestinian Authority, and their president, Mahmoud Abbas. Welcome to The Big Picture, a show about the past, the present, and the future. My name is Mohammed Hassan, and today we sit down with Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Husam Zomlot. 48 hours was the window that Israel gave to the US for how long this operation was going to take. What do you think Israel achieved by the time that it pulled out its forces?
Nothing. Just more victims, more killed, more injured, destruction, utter destruction of infrastructure, of hospitals, targeting of medics and ambulances, journalists. If you go and visit the camp and if you see the footages, it's complete mayhem. They leave mayhem behind and an exodus of the population the night before last. This is what they leave. They leave more resentment, more resilience, more determination to struggle against this, because this has been ongoing for a long time. Nothing. Israel is doing this because it wants to keep its occupation, to sustain its illegal presence in the occupied territories, to protect its illegal settlements. Israel is not protecting itself as per the Western statements. Israel has the right for self-defense. Israel is protecting its expansion and its colonialism. So it is very regrettable that so far this is the only policy Israel has, which is brutality and more brutality, oppression and more oppression. This is the first time they use drones and shellings against civilians in a refugee camp, sending the whole thing into a new level. So the situation is very acute. It's chronic and acute at the very same time. Yet the Palestinian people have a lot of resilience to show, a spirit of steadfastness. And I think what had enabled us to survive for all these years will also enable us to survive this current fanatical government and all other Israeli governments until this occupation ends.
Jenin is an extremely densely populated refugee camp, as you mentioned. And we saw that footage of people fleeing after the first night of bombing. There's about 3,000 people that are estimated to have left their homes. Some of them were attempt to try and return to their homes. I assume some of them won't be able to. Who are the people living in this camp, and what does this mean for them to have to flee their home essentially twice?
You're right. The Jenin refugee camp is one of the most dense areas on Earth. It's only less than half square kilometer. That's 1/3 of Hyde Park, by the way. And 24,000 people live in that very small area. The state of poverty is among the highest in the world in that camp, besieged from all sides. And then after this latest Israeli aggression, several homes have been either completely or partially demolished. So it will take time for people and for institutions to actually rebuild the camp and enable people to come back to their homes. And the suffering did not end when Israel pulled out. The suffering will continue until the utter destruction Israel left behind is rebuilt.
We saw last week the first time, aerial attacks were used by Israel. It's been a very long time when that kind of military power was employed by Israel into the West Bank specifically. And then this week we saw what looked like a full-scale incursion by Israeli forces. Why the sudden escalation? What is happening or what has been happening that has led to this point?
The Israeli fanatical government. You have a government composed of Benjamin Netanyahu, who lives on the one idea that Jews have an exclusive right to the whole historic land of Palestine from the river to the sea. He's public about it. He thinks that, we are the invaders and the occupiers, not him. And his entire policy is to derail any prospects for a peace process based on the international legality and international resolutions. And he has been credited for destroying the Oslo process. But also he has put together a coalition that includes most racist, ultra-right-wing psychos like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others who deny the very existence of the Palestinian people. Ben-Gvir yesterday was celebrating that some Israeli civilians bypassers executed a Palestinian in his head as he was dying and injured. This is a government that we deal with, and therefore one expected a different reaction by the international community with such a government. But regrettably, we don't know what will it take for the international community to take action. With such a government, one expected at least some accountability, some policy of no contact. But regrettably, it seems the West is absolutely set on to protect Israel no matter what, and no matter who is in government, and no matter what policy they promote, and no matter what racism and warmongering they promote. It is actually regrettable. So we are facing huge challenges at a time when the region is going through a very difficult period, and a time when the international community is primarily focused on Ukraine and other issues. The Palestinian people find themselves almost alone in defending themselves and in making sure that the Israeli army and the Israeli government will not implement or get away with what it wants, which is practically the liquidation of any symbol or resemblance of Palestinian nationalism, of Palestinian protest, of Palestinian resistance. That did not happen, and I assure you that will not happen. An army can defeat an army, but an army can never defeat a nation.
Part of your role is speaking on behalf of Palestinian leadership here in the UK, and a big part of that is speaking to media. And you have been critical in the past of the way that the Palestinian issue, the way that Israel's tactics in the West Bank and in Gaza have been portrayed by international media. How do you think the media did this time around?
Very poorly, I have to say, very poorly. And I've done many interviews over the last 40 hours with all the mainstream media in the UK and in the US. And I tell you, I came out even more certain that international mainstream media directly plays a role in the plight of the Palestinian people and the oppression of the Palestinian people, because they are actively engaged in distorting facts, in distorting the Palestinian quest for freedom and dignity, the Palestinian struggle, and seeking all the time to give Israel a cover for its atrocities. In most of the questions I receive, it's always about Israeli casualties, not about the much more Palestinian victims. I just came out from an interview with Sky, and the only focus was about an incident in Tel Aviv yesterday when Israel was wreaking havoc, destroying an entire refugee camp in Jenin, killing children in Ramallah and here and there, when the numbers are all over the place. 190 Palestinians were killed so far in the first 6 months of this year, including 24 children. One of them is Muhammad al-Tamimi, 2.5 years old, who was shot in the arms of his own dad, his own father. And yet the international media is only focusing on trying to blame the victim all the time, trying to shed light that the issue is violence by Palestinians, terrorism by Palestinians, not illegal occupation by Israel, not subjugation and oppression that has lasted for 75 years. And therefore, the international media is trying always to blur the picture and to confuse their audience on purpose and to strip the whole situation of context. And our role is becoming more and more challenging. And I have to admit to you, it is frustrating for a Palestinian ambassador, a Palestinian voice, to face up all this and to face all these challenges. And, you know, many of these journalists invite you with a mindset of, we got you. They just want to get you. They don't want to understand the real situation. They don't want to have any real empathy. I don't feel that there is real objectivity or neutrality when it comes to their questions. And sometimes I feel, not only I feel, I know that it follows the talking points and the propaganda of the Israeli occupation army, the spokesman of the talking points of the Israeli embassy and the Israeli occupation army, the official side, and they pick the same talking points and they throw it on you. No. The BBC should know better and should do better. And Sky and all the various mainstream media here. Their job is to portray the truth and to report the truth. They have many reporters there and they know what is happening to the Palestinian people. They know what just happened a couple of weeks ago when settlers went into rampage against several Palestinian villages, burning homes and cars and properties and killing Palestinians. Those are illegal settlers. And now the Palestinian people are not only facing the Israeli military, as has been the case for many decades, we are also facing the settler militias all over the West Bank, the occupied West Bank. Furthermore, we are facing Israeli civilians that are being armed by Ben Gvir and the Israeli government to kill at will and without any accountability. Not one of these settlers have been brought to justice. Not one of them have been arrested. And therefore, the media here, instead of focusing on these gross violation of international law, gross violation of human rights, war crimes committed by Israel, crimes against humanity, such as apartheid, very well documented by the UK-based Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch in the US and the Israeli Human Rights Beit Salim and the numerous Palestinian human rights organizations, instead of focusing on that and asking us, how do we resolve this? They always focus on portraying to the Western audience that the problem is the Palestinian people, that the victims are the ones who actually brought it upon themselves, that there is a mismanagement, that the Palestinian Authority is not in control of this camp or that camp, that you sit there as an ambassador and you have to tell us, do you condemn your own people? So the media is really responsible for a big part of why this very illegal situation has lasted for 75 years. And I am very grateful that we have alternative media now. And we have social media, because the truth is coming out. And especially the youth in this country and beyond are realizing that actually what is happening is different than what they have been fed for many decades.
And so when you are preparing yourself for one of these interviews, knowing the kind of narrative that you expect to be pushed against you, knowing how small that frame that you're given to be able to speak to, what are you bringing into these interviews? What message do you hope to get across?
I always hope to represent our people, be a voice for our people, and tell the world the story, the actual story of our people. I always aspire to make sure that I don't get and let the media get away with it. And this is not only me, but every Palestinian voice has the same responsibility. To be a Palestinian representative is the honor of my life, but it's a huge responsibility. This is a cause that has inspired millions of people around the world, that has seen generation after generation of Palestinians defending our rights and keeping the flame, that has international law beside it and with it. And therefore, we must get it right, and we must present the right narrative, and we must challenge the Israeli hasbara and propaganda and spin and lies that have lasted for a long time with the full complicity of some mainstream media outlets. Now we are much more capable to do so. Now we sit and we set up and we tell all these media and journalists and anchors, you're asking the wrong question immediately. This is not the right question. We call them out. We call them out, and there is no half measures when it comes to representing the plight of the Palestinian people. And I'm not asking for media to be pro this or that. I am asking for media to be pro truth. That's what I'm asking for. Playing with words and always wanting to make the Palestinians appear as if we are the aggressors is a business that is criminal and has gone on for almost 100 years, especially in this country. We are not the aggressors, we are the victims. And I said this to CNN yesterday, that let's establish some very undisputed facts. Number one, we are the people under subjugation and occupation. So our land is occupied. This is the US position, this is the UK, and this is the international community. And number two, as such, every act Israel does in the occupied territory is an act of aggression, every act. And as such, and thus, every act we do is an act of resistance and an act of protest. Yet, the media gets it almost upside down. Completely upside down. The media is so, and I'm not talking about everyone. I'm not generalizing here. But some media outlets and journalists are there to actually flip things on its head, as if we are occupied. You know, when you listen to some of these reports or some of these questions, you would get out of the moment, or you would come out after that report or interview thinking that it's the Palestinians that are besieging Tel Aviv, thinking that it's the Palestinians that are colonizing Israel, thinking that it's the Palestinians that are, depriving the Israelis from traveling or working. It's unbelievable how media has not really portrayed it the way it was. But I have to admit, there are other media reports that are much better. And we need to keep pushing in that direction. And there is a responsibility upon us to provide more accurate information than the spin that comes out of the Israeli official machine and the Israeli army.
הפעולה הנרחבת בג'נין היא ביטוי לשינוי מדיניות ושינוי משוואה. במקום תגובה, יוזמה. במקום המתנה, הפתעה. כוחותינו ימשיכו לפעול בכל רגע שבו יידרשו, תוך חופש פעולה מלא בג'נין ובכל יהודה ושומרון. אם ג'נין תחזור לטרור, אנחנו נחזור לג'נין. וזה יקרה הרבה יותר מהר ובעוצמה הרבה יותר גדולה ממה שחושבים. מי שלא מבין את זה היום, יבין את זה מהר מאוד.
There's been a lot of international condemnation of this Israeli administration. It is, by most people's measure, the most far-right government that Israel has ever seen. And it's helmed by people such as Itamar Ben-Gvir, who you mentioned, who's now the National Security Minister. He is somebody that has not really minced his words about how he feels about Palestinian statehood. He's against it. He also hasn't minced his words about the Palestinian Authority and dealing with the Palestinian Authority. In one interview, he came out saying that he wanted to dismantle the Palestinian Authority and for Israel to return to what's, pre-Oslo, to basically, take control effectively of the region. Has the relationship between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government changed with this new government?
There's no relationship. There's no relationship. And this government is not just saying that by words, it's doing it by deeds. They have been undermining the Palestinian Authority. They have been undermining any Palestinian institutions. And I think what Ben Gvir said represents the actual policy of this government. The question is what the rest of the world is doing about this government. Everybody thought that, countries like the UK will say, okay, hang on. We are not going to deal with people like this. This is beyond our, red lines. But not only the UK and the US are not doing that. They are rewarding this government. Look, only a couple of days ago in the UK Parliament, Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Level Up, presented a bill to ban public bodies from boycotting Israel. But in doing so, he was, and the government, providing the settlements an extra layer of protection. So Ben Gvir have a lot to celebrate. So with all the racism you've just mentioned, with all the statements, and it's not just, by the way, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the Prime Minister himself is against any Palestinian state and against the two-state solution. So the whole government, in the formation of this Israeli government, in the contract between all the factions, the first sentence was, this government will ensure that this land is exclusive to the Jewish people from the river to the sea, and that they will accelerate the building of the colonies, the illegal settlements in the occupied territory. So from the first sentence, one expected countries like the UK to come and say, oops, come on, no, hang on. The two-state solution is our policy, you're against it. Settlements are illegal according to our law and policy, you are with it, and therefore we will not deal with you. Not only they didn't do that, they are giving them a carrot after a carrot, more trade deals, more impunity and protection. The UK has voted against us in the International Court of Justice, and it was a request by the UN General Assembly to refer the issue of Palestine-Israel to the ICJ for an advisory opinion, a legal advisory opinion. So the big question that keeps hitting me and us, what will it take for countries like the UK, who are responsible in the first place on our oppression, ongoing, what will it take to change their modus operandi? What will it take to change their policy? I thought such a government would be it. Such a government in Israel would be it. No.
The resistance movement that has grown out of Jenin over the last 2 weeks, the Jenin brigades, and similarly in Nablus, the Lion's Den, and other movements around the West Bank, seem to be at a point in time, I think, more heightened than we've seen in recent times. And part of this resistance movement is a sort of rejection of Palestinian leadership, the Palestinian Authority. Yesterday, the moment that Israeli soldiers left Jenin, there were footage of people attacking the PA security headquarters. There is a lot of criticism now that the Palestinian Authority is under for failing to intervene, but also failing to adequately represent Palestinian interests, certainly with from the perspective of some of these young people. From your perspective, has the Palestinian Authority, is it able to adequately represent Palestinians today?
Well, first of all, the Palestinian people are frustrated, and there is, especially among the youth, a lack of hope and a lack of sense of possibilities, and there is hopelessness and helplessness and severe anger and frustration, and you cannot blame them because the situation for a long time has not yielded any good political results. But answering your question, the Palestinian Authority was established as an interim institution to undertake the PLO's responsibilities under the Oslo Accords. It was meant to be the nucleus of the state to come and build the national institutions to educate our kids national curriculums, as opposed to my generation that we were, our curriculum was dictated by the Israelis, to provide health care and what have you. But the Palestinian Authority did not turn into a state and did not form an army. And this is something we need to think about. So there is no actual physical ability to go and protect. But I understand the dilemma here. The Palestinian Authority's approach is to use popular resistance. And I'm talking about the leadership in general. Popular resistance, as has been happening in Bil'in and Na'lin and Bidya and all these villages around the wall and the settlements. Mass popular resistance, and to also use international accountability, as in the ICC and the ICJ, to use sanctions against the illegalities to try and tilt the balance and make the cost of occupation much higher. Now we need to sit and assess if, what needs to change here, what needs to change. But the Palestinian Authority is a national institution, and it's an institution that is geared to serve its people. And anyone who expects otherwise is wrong.
What do you think needs to change?
We need to reassess the whole relationship with A, Israel, and B, some key allies of Israel. We really do need to reassess that. I think the Palestinian people and leadership have tried every trick to reach a peaceful settlement to this via American mediations, numerous attempts and all that. This is a time when we have to rethink and come up with a new strategy that our people, our region and the world would accept, and that would deliver us our legitimate rights.
فإننا نجدد مطالبتنا للمجتمع الدولي بوجوب توفير الحماية الدولية العاجلة لشعبنا وفرض العقوبات على كيان الاحتلال. وقد وجهت الحكومة وأجهزتها أن توفر كل ما يلزم من أجل تعزيز صمود أهلنا في جنين وبقية أرض دولة فلسطين.
Yesterday, the Palestinian president announced cutting security ties with Israel. This is a response that we are used to seeing whenever there is an escalation of violence. In effect, what does this actually mean? What levers, what cards does the Palestinian Authority have in being able to control security in its own territories?
You cannot control your security when you have an occupying army invading your cities at will at any time and regularly all the time. You cannot control security when there is an Israeli government that is set on undermining the Palestinian Authority, and not only undermining it in the security sense, but even financially. As you may know, they have been withholding our own funds under the pretext that the Palestinian Authority pays salaries for the families of the martyrs and the families of the prisoners. And therefore, Palestine, the Palestinian territory, are under full occupation. Oslo did not yield any real rolling back of the occupation. And to the contrary, we have seen the quadrupling of the settlements by size and numbers. And therefore, no way the current situation can provide what the Palestinian people deserve and demand, which is protection. Some of the thinking is that in such a situation, the best is to call for international protection, as in blue hats, the UN, and it happens with many nations in such a situation. That's why you have the Palestinian president and leadership calling for international protection all the time. The alternative is to form our own army and to be as strong as the Israeli army, and to perhaps have the alliance of the West completely. And that is going to take some time. The thinking right now in Palestine is that the biggest force we have is our people, and how do we provide all the possible help and support to our people to survive and to withstand and to struggle and to continue to march towards freedom. And the PA is belongs to the Palestinian people. So if the Palestinian people decide that this is an institution that we need to reform or redefine some of its functions, let it be.
There are a lot of calls. I think they have been increasing for a reformation of the PA. There are some people that want the PA to step aside completely and for a new organization to take its place. There obviously haven't been elections for some time. What avenues are there for Palestinians to challenge the PA and its criticisms?
Well, there is a lot of venues, and the Palestinian people are very vocal. Don't worry about them. And there is a lot of protests, and they voice their opinions all the time. And the best way to do so is elections. There's no other way. We need elections, and elections should be the way to determine the will of the people and where they want us to go. Elections were supposed to happen last year. The issue of Jerusalem is very serious. We cannot conduct elections without the 350,000 Palestinian Jerusalemites. Otherwise, we would have accepted the Trump deal of the century that excludes Jerusalem and much of the rest of the West Bank. Jerusalem is a very sensitive issue. The compass of the Palestinian struggle is towards Jerusalem. It's the heart of the whole matter. But we must come up with solutions, and we must come up with creative ideas to actually, in the earliest opportunity, go back to our people. Let them decide, let them elect their representatives, and let them have their verdict of where they want this to go. In the end, every single institution that exists there to serve the Palestinian people. And the only source of legitimacy is the Palestinian people. There is no other source. So there is a lot of discussion now about elections, primarily elections, especially that efforts for reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas, Gaza and West Bank, have been ongoing, but so far has not reached a conclusion. Then the best way is to go above all that and go to the source of legitimacy, which is the Palestinian people.
There's a young generation now that is at the forefront of this armed uprising, certainly in Jenin and Nablus and other places. The criticism from Israel is that the PA cannot control its own ranks, and there have been people that have taken part in these armed movements that have come from security forces themselves. Is this organization essentially fracturing from within, especially with these young people that are angry, that are fiery, and that want to take up arms?
Palestinian institutions are there to provide for our people. That's the mandate, and to protect our people. Remember, in the second Intifada, it was the Palestinian security apparatuses that confronted the Israeli invading army. And also remember that most of people Israel has killed recently, including in Jenin and including the last few months, most of them are Fatah local leaders. Some of them are actually members of the security apparatuses. Israel does not distinguish between factions. Its bullets are not really, they don't have a chip to distinguish. And the Palestinian people know that. They know very much that everyone is under attack. Everyone is targeted, be it the youth, be it the ordinary households and people, or be it the Palestinian national institutions. We are all under attack. And while people are angry and frustrated, they realize that the only way forward is that we come together. We come together. The Palestinian national movement, put aside the Palestinian Authority and all that, the Palestinian national movement has come out of the womb of the Palestine nation that was led by Yasser Arafat and President Abbas and Abu Jihad and Abu Iyad and all these leaders. That national movement have turned us from refugees and a humanitarian case to freedom fighters, and has snatched recognition by the world of our legitimate collective rights, the right of self-determination, establishing a state, ending occupation, recognizing us in the UN and elsewhere, and recognizing our right of return. That didn't come out of nothing. We are not passive victims. This period is a very difficult period, but it's within a very long period of Palestinian bravery and heroism in every sense. And I think the youth knows that, and they know their parents, and most of their parents were engaged in the Palestinian institutions, including the PA. So you cannot separate, my friend. It's not, there are the youth and there are this and there are that. In one family, you will have people who work for the authority and people who are opposing and people who are happy and people. But the key point is that we have one common enemy and one conflict only. That is with the occupier. That is with the occupier. And every one of us understands that while we have many disagreements, in the end, our focus has to only be there. And I hope lessons have been learned that there is no hope for a negotiated solution with the current Israeli reality. And that the best way is to make sure that we are united, that we incorporate and we listen and absorb the voices of our youth, and that we correct path if needed.
Finally, Ambassador, what we are seeing on the ground now is hasn't been seen for some time, for a lot of years. And as you mentioned, there is this movement, there is this anger amongst young people, and there are a lot of people calling for an armed resistance against what you said is kind of a dead end in negotiations with Israel. Do you think we are seeing the beginnings of another, Palestinian-wide armed resistance movement? And if so, do Palestinian leadership support that movement?
Armed resistance was the strategy of the Palestine national movement, of Yasser Arafat and of Fatah for a long time. And armed resistance against a belligerent military occupation, as per international law, is legitimate. And we have, the movement has used armed resistance for a long time. But we have arrived at a moment in the late 80s, early 90s, whereby engaging international actors led us to fully adopt international resolutions and accepting international provisions and adhering to the international consensus, which came in the form of a two-state solution. From there came the Madrid and the Oslo peace process and what have you. And there was many attempts at making that work. In the process, we have shifted from negotiation, there's no negotiation for the last so many years, to actually leveraging our status as an entity in the international system, as a state, to actually enforce international accountability, towards Israel, to enforce some sort of sanctions, to undermine the feasibility of the occupation, the economic and the military. So there has been a strategy for the last few years, but now we face a new challenge, a new mountain to climb, and I very much understand that this needs rethinking.
Husam Zomlot, thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for watching this episode of The Big Picture. As always, please share your thoughts with us on what you think about the raid in Jenin, the response from the Palestinian Authority, as well as the international community. And thank you to Husam Zomlot for being our guest. You can follow our work here by subscribing either to YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. As always, my name is Mohammed, and until next time, salam.